You go to bed one evening and the vegetable patch is looking verdant, full of promise. The leaves are unblemished, the soil is damp and full of the optimism of a new season. You awake, full of anticipation for the day ahead, only to discover to your horror that a plague has struck. For overnight, a host of slugs have been busy and systematically destroyed your crops. Slugs are the bane of every gardener's life, leaving a trail of devastation in their slimy wake. But fear not, my fellow gardeners, because there are ways to combat these pesky mollusks without resorting to chemical warfare. Welcome to Don't Do This Guide, where we show you what not to do so you can garden smarter. If you love gardening but hate pests ruining your hard work, you're in the right place. Slugs are the stealth bombers of the garden. They hide during the day in the dark, damp recesses, under rocks, low-lying branches, in the dense foliage at the base of a hedge, or, more often than not, tucked away in the cool, moist soil. Then, as soon as dusk falls and the moisture in the air rises, they emerge from their hidey holes and get to work. Slugs are hermaphrodites, which means they have both male and female reproductive organs. This means they spend their entire lives eating and mating, laying up to 500 eggs a year. These eggs lie dormant in the soil until the conditions are just right, usually warm and wet. Then, hey presto, a whole new generation of hungry slugs is unleashed upon your lettuces. The damage they do is instantly recognizable. Large, irregular holes are chewed in leaves, stems are severed, and seedlings can be completely devoured overnight. But it's not just the direct damage they cause. Slugs can also spread fungal diseases throughout your garden, further weakening your plants. Slugs are masters of adaptation and have evolved to thrive in a variety of habitats. By understanding their life cycle, their habits, and their weaknesses, we can start to tip the balance in our favor. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of how to deter slugs, let's first address some common mistakes gardeners make. Often, these well-intentioned actions can actually make the problem worse. Firstly, resist the temptation to reach for the chemical slug pellets. Yes, they will kill slugs, but they can also harm other wildlife, hedgehogs, birds, even pets, who might ingest them accidentally. These chemicals also leach into the soil, potentially harming beneficial insects and disrupting the delicate balance of your garden ecosystem. Secondly, avoid overwatering your plants. Slugs love moisture. It's essential for their survival. By keeping your garden on the drier side, you make it less hospitable to them. Water your plants in the morning, giving them time to dry out during the day, and try to water directly at the roots rather than overhead, which creates a humid microclimate that slugs adore. Another common mistake is leaving garden debris lying around. Piles of leaves, dead plant material, upturned pots. These all provide perfect hiding places for slugs during the day. Keep your garden tidy, clearing away any potential slug havens. This will make it harder for them to find shelter and force them out into the open, where they are more vulnerable to predators. Now, slugs might be persistent, but they're not exactly known for their athleticism. Creating physical barriers around your plants can be a surprisingly effective way to keep them at bay. One of the most effective and satisfying methods is to create a perimeter of crushed eggshells. Simply save up your eggshells, crush them into small pieces, not too fine, you want some sharp edges, and sprinkle them around your plants. The sharp edges of the eggshells deter slugs by making it uncomfortable for them to crawl over. Plus, eggshells are a great source of calcium for your soil, so it's a win-win situation. Another option is to use copper tape. Copper tape creates a small electrical charge when a slug comes into contact with it, giving them a mild but harmless shock that sends them scuttling in the opposite direction. You can buy copper tape from most garden centers, or even repurpose old copper pipes or flashing. Just make sure the copper surface is clean and free of any coatings. Wool pellets are another surprisingly effective barrier. Slugs don't like the texture of wool and will avoid crawling over it. You can buy wool pellets from garden centers, or simply cut up old woolen jumpers or blankets. Just be sure to use natural, untreated wool, as synthetic fibers won't have the same effect. Now, let's talk about companion planting. Companion planting is the art of growing different plants together for mutual benefit. In this case, we want to choose plants that slugs naturally avoid, effectively creating a protective shield around our more vulnerable crops. Herbs are your secret weapon here. Strong-smelling herbs like rosemary, lavender, sage, and thyme are particularly effective at repelling slugs. Plant them around the edges of your beds, or interplant them amongst your vegetables. Not only will they deter slugs, they'll also attract beneficial insects and add a wonderful aroma to your garden. Other plants that slugs tend to avoid include ferns, astrantia, euphorbia, and anything with hairy or fuzzy leaves. When planning your garden, think about creating a tapestry of different plants, with a variety of textures and scents. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, slugs still manage to find their way into our gardens. When this happens, it's time to get proactive and set some traps. And the best traps are the ones you can make yourself using simple household items. One of the most well-known and effective slug traps is the beer trap. Slugs are attracted to the yeast in beer, so a shallow dish of beer sunk into the ground so the rim is level with the soil acts like a magnet. The slugs crawl in for a drink, fall in, and drown. It's not pretty, but it is effective. Another simple trap uses grapefruit halves. Slugs love the sweet, citrusy scent of grapefruit, so simply cut a grapefruit in half, scoop out most of the flesh, leaving a thin layer, and place the halves upside down in your garden. The slugs will be drawn to the scent, crawl underneath the grapefruit halves for a feast, and you can collect them at your leisure. You can also create a more humane trap using an upturned plastic pot. Simply prop the pot up on a small stone, creating a small gap underneath. Now, one of the best ways to control slug populations is to encourage their natural predators into your garden. By creating a welcoming habitat for these creatures, you can turn them into valuable allies in your fight against these slimy pests. One of the most effective slug predators is the humble hedgehog. These prickly creatures have a voracious appetite for slugs and can make a significant dent in their numbers. To attract hedgehogs to your garden, create hedgehog highways, small holes in fences or walls, to allow them to move freely between gardens. You can also provide them with food and shelter by leaving out a shallow dish of water and creating a hedgehog house from logs, bricks, or even an upturned plastic box covered with leaves. Birds are another valuable ally in the fight against slugs. Thrushes in particular are known for their slug-eating habits. Attract birds to your garden by providing them with food, water, and nesting sites. Bird feeders, bird baths, and nesting boxes will all encourage birds to take up residence in your garden. Other slug predators include frogs, toads, slowworms, and ground beetles. Finally, let's talk about organic slug repellents. These are natural substances that deter slugs without harming them or the environment. They work by either masking the scent of the plants, making them difficult for slugs to find, or by creating an unpleasant surface for them to crawl over. One of the simplest and most effective organic slug repellents is garlic spray. Garlic contains a compound called allicin, which is toxic to slugs. To make garlic spray, simply crush a few cloves of garlic and soak them in water overnight. Strain the mixture and pour it into a spray bottle. Spray the garlic solution around your plants, being sure to target the undersides of leaves where slugs like to hide. Coffee grounds are another effective slug repellent. Slugs don't like the smell of coffee and will avoid crawling over it. Simply sprinkle used coffee grounds around your plants, creating a barrier that slugs will be reluctant to cross. Coffee grounds are also a good source of nitrogen for your soil, so it's a double win. Other natural slug repellents include diatomaceous earth, wood ash, and seaweed. Diatomaceous earth is a fine powder made from fossilized algae. It works by dehydrating slugs on contact. Wood ash is a good source of potassium for your soil, but it can also deter slugs. So there you have it, a whole arsenal of creative and, most importantly, eco-friendly ways to protect your garden from slugs. Remember, gardening is all about working with nature, not against it. By understanding the habits and weaknesses of these slimy pests, we can outsmart them and keep our gardens thriving. If you found these tips helpful, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more gardening advice. Happy gardening!